authors unless you want to present here.
We have no authors here, so I will present my bill. Okay, so I'll turn the gavel over to Senator Lima. Take the gavel. Okay. And this bill is SB 513. So, Madam Chair, members.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, members. The Carl Moyer program under the Rare Resources Board provides grants for cleaner engines, equipment, and emission reduction strategies. It is administered by local air districts and is complemented by local quote, AB 923 incentive programs, which are also administered by local air districts. These programs only fund technologies that are cleaner than required by the current federal, state, and local laws and regulations. In other words, these funds cannot be used to comply with the current regulations requirements. AB 8 of 2013 extended funding for the Carl Moyer and several other emission reduction programs. It also required the Air Resources Board and local air districts to convene a public process to evaluate the now 15-year-old Moyer program. Through that process, the ARB and the local air districts and various stakeholders identified a series of improvements to make the program more effective. And this bill is the result of that. This bill is simply what I call a 15-year tune-up of the program. And these updates include enabling the project sponsors to leverage other public funds, giving local air districts flexibility to fund projects with multiple benefits, expanding the programs to include new technologies, and more. The bill has the support of all 35 air districts in California, no opposition I'm aware of, and I respectfully ask for I vote. We have witnesses.
Thank you, Senator. Those in support, please.
Yes, Madam Chair and members, my name is Jim Wagoner, and I'm the Air Pollution Control Officer with the Butte County Air Quality Management District. And today I'm here as the Vice President and current Legislative Chair for the California Air Pollution Control Officers Association, or CAPCOA, which is the association of air pollution control officers from all 35 local air districts in California. We're pleased to sponsor this important legislation to make improvements to the Carl Moyer Memorial Air Quality Standards Attainment Program and the local AB 923 incentives programs, both of which have been highly successful for many years. To date, the programs have collectively replaced more than 46,000 engines, have removed more than 174,600 tons of smog and 6,400 tons of diesel particulates from the atmosphere. However, new regulations have gone into effect and new emission reduction technologies have been introduced since these programs were first developed, creating barriers to funding. Current statute limits the ability of the programs to adjust to these changes and take into account evolving cleaner technologies, cost of stationary and mobile regulations, and ancillary benefits of the funded projects. During the public workshops mentioned by Senator Bell, a number of specific limitations to the programs were identified. These include the inability to provide meaningful grant amounts to the cleanest, most advanced technologies, recognize other project benefits, and also to combine the Carl Moyer program with funding with other funding sources. And as Senator Bell mentioned, there are several areas that we are recommending changes. Madam Chair and members, this bill maintains the core focus of these successful programs, but makes important updates to ensure that they continue to fund ever cleaner equipment that maximizes emission reductions. We respectfully request your support on this important measure.
Thank you. Next in support.
Madam Chair, this is Barbara Baird from the South Coast Air Quality Management District, and I'm just here to register our support for this bill and help answer any questions if there is any need for that.
Thank you.
And Jennifer Gross with the Air Resources Board. ARB has worked in partnership with CAPCOA in convening the working groups and worked with them on developing the language, and we're here to answer any technical questions.
Thank you. Yes.
Madam Chair, I'm Fred Minassian from South Coast Air Quality Management District. I'm also here to answer any technical questions you may have, and we do support the bill.
Great. Thank you, sir. We have others in support.
Tom Addison with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, agreeing with Senator Bell. It's time for a tune-up. Strong support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, Katrina Robinson on behalf of CalSTART in support.
Thank you.
Cindy Hillary on behalf of the 34 rural counties in California in support.
Sylvia Solis Shaw on behalf of the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District. The valley has some of the worst air pollution in the country. Incentive programs such as this go a long way in cleaning up the air in the valley. We ask for your support.
Thank you.
John Caldwell on behalf of the California Electric Transportation Coalition. We're in support.
Brendan Tuig on behalf of the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District in support.
Bill McGavin with Coalition for Clean Air in support, and the American Lung Association in California asked me to also express their support.
Thank you.
Steve Wallach on behalf of the Center for Transportation and Environment support.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in support? Do we have any opposition? Senator Bell, would you like to close?
Thank you, committee. I'd like to ask for your endorsement of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bell, and we will take a vote once we have a quorum. Thank you.
We'll go back to file order, and present is Senator Liu. You have the floor, Senator. Senator Liu has item number 9, SB 580, and that's surplus residential property, historic buildings. Senator, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members. Today I present SB 580, a district bill regarding disposition of homes Caltrans purchased 60 years ago for the North State Route 710 project. This is my 5th bill on this topic in over 12 years in the legislature, 2 of which made it to the governor's desk, and only 1 of which was signed. However, believe it or not, we are finally approaching closure on the issue of homes, if not the project itself. Disposition of the homes is governed by a 40-year-old law known as the Roberti Bill, the objectives of which are to generate affordable housing and preserve neighborhoods. But sale of homes has been deferred for decades while the North 710 project has lingered in litigation. The project was rebooted 4 years ago, and the original route for the project has now been discarded. This clears the way for Caltrans to sell many of the homes, which at this point have been occupied by tenants for decades. Caltrans currently owns 399 residential properties with 490 housing units. The single-family units comprise 310 rented, 33 vacant, and 14 not habitable. There are 93 rented multifamily units. 15 are vacant, and 25 are not habitable. Of historical significance are 83 single-family houses with 73 rented, 7 vacant, and 3 not habitable, and 27 multifamily units, which with 19 rented, 4 vacant, and 4 not habitable. While Caltrans is proceeding with draft regulations that I believe address most concerns regarding sale of the properties, one last issue warrants a legislative remedy. That is the disposition of properties, including the historical properties, that may not be suitable for affordable housing. SB 580 also provides a mechanism for public affordable housing entities to generate funds for affordable housing by enabling them to buy and rehabilitate homes and sell them for profit. That profit would in return be applied to building affordable housing in the same general area. The bill also gives public and nonprofit entities a priority over affordable housing entities to purchase an historical home. Public entities could rehabilitate and sell the house for profit and apply the funds to build affordable housing in the same area. Alternatively, the public entity or nonprofit would restore and open the historical home for public use. Mr. Chair, members, resolution of this issue has been a long time coming. My office is in close contact and coordination with Caltrans as they proceed with regulations implementing the Roberti bill as amended by my SB 416 of 2013. We are mindful, very mindful of the need to maintain synchrony between the pending legislation and the pending regulations and ask you to move this bill forward today. So in closing, I'm asking you for your support on this bill.
Thank you, Senator. Supporters, please. Any supporters? Seeing none. Opponents? Any questions from committee members? Okay, thank you. Senator, we're going to, when we reach a quorum, we will have a vote on your bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience and understanding.
Okay. Senator Mitchell's here. Senator, welcome. Senator Mitchell has item 11 on agenda, SB 655, and you have the floor, Senator.
Thank you very much, Senator. I appreciate it. Glad to have the opportunity to share with you today SB 655. No wonder I can't see the words. I don't have on my glasses. That might help, Senator. SB 55 is a bill that will create clarity in the Health and Safety Code by adding mold as a substandard living condition. Indoor mold growth in living spaces or domiciles is unfortunately common. While data on moldy conditions in housing is scarce, we know mold is one of the most common housing complaints received by tenants' rights groups, legal aid organizations, and code enforcement agencies across the state. Scientific evidence on the adverse health impacts of exposure to mold have become increasingly clear. A 2011 review of the academic literature on the health risks associated with indoor dampness and mold found consensus on an association between dampness, water damage, visible mold or mold odor, and a wide range of respiratory and allergic health effects, including asthma, bronchitis, and respiratory infections. Because mold isn't explicitly referenced in state code, local enforcement agencies are uncertain about their authority to address this common complaint. That's the primary challenge that we've experienced. This uncertainty leads to widely inconsistent enforcement approaches to mold across the state, ranging from taking no enforcement action to limiting enforcement to water-related issues that are identified in the code, to, in a few places, enforcing mold issues as a general nuisance. Due to the growing evidence linking mold to adverse health impacts, state code should be updated to provide local enforcement agencies with clear authority to address complaints. This authority should include the ability to require both the cleaning or removal of mold materials and the remediation of underlying sources of moisture. Current state code provides local enforcement agencies with the authority to address moisture issues only. Concerns from opposition that you'll probably hear from today have indicated that this bill does not present a workable standard for code enforcement or for property owners, and that the inclusion of mold in the code is both unnecessary and unreasonable. We've also heard concerns regarding potential pre-existing health challenges a tenant may have that they will then, after the fact, attribute to the mold in their current unit. While settling on language that is fair and balanced for both landlords and provides necessary protections for tenants is indeed our goal, we will continue to strive to find that balance. I remain concerned with the notion that including mold as a substandard living condition is unnecessary and unreasonable. Code enforcement officers have made it clear that current law does not provide clarity when it comes to defining mold. We've worked hard with advocates, code enforcement officers, your committee staff, to create what we feel is a clear definition of mold that would give a standard definition across jurisdictions. With me today to testify is Brandon Kitagawa from Regional Asthma Management and Prevention, and Carrie Simpson from the California Association of Code Enforcement Officers.
Okay, thank you. Witnesses, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Brandon Kitagawa. I'm a policy associate with Regional Asthma Management and Prevention. SB 655 is a housing bill before the Transportation and Housing Committee, but ultimately this is a public health policy. You know, the science, as the Senator mentioned, has become increasingly clear about the connection.
Excuse me, sir. We're going to hold off and take roll because we have a quorum now.
Fair enough.
I'll get it when I can.
I don't blame you.
Can we call the roll, please?
Bell.
Here.
Bell present. Canella.
Here.
Canella present. Allen. Bates. Bates present. Gaines. Galgiani. Leyva. Leyva present. McGuire. Mendoza. Roth. Roth present. Wachowski. Wachowski present.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Sir, you may proceed.
Thank you.
So we can vote on our bill. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so the science, as the Senator mentioned, has become increasingly clear about the association of exposure to indoor dampness and mold and health. I think additional research, more recent research has also shown that exposure to these conditions, especially early in life, not only can exacerbate conditions, but also been linked to the development of new asthma. And this research has led to a 2011 guidance document from the Department of Public Health that I shared with each member's office that clearly states that the department sees the connection and sees a clear health risk with mold in indoor environments and recommends quick action to address the underlying source of water as well as removing the mold as safely as possible. Mold is of particular concern for those of us in the asthma community, with 5 million Californians having been diagnosed with asthma in the state. But not all communities are impacted the same. We are particularly concerned about communities disproportionately burdened by the disease. Low-income communities and communities of color experience higher rates of asthma and worse health outcomes in terms of hospitalizations and emergency department visits. Some of this disparity is related to the inequitable exposure to asthma triggers, both in the outdoor air and particularly in housing. So addressing these disparities in exposure to asthma triggers are one of the best ways we can help prevent the disease. Giving code enforcement officers clear authority to address mold will help ensure that this asthma trigger that disproportionately impacts the same low-income communities that have higher rates of asthma can be addressed quickly and safely. So we urge your support on the bill.
Other speakers, please.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Carrie Simpson. I am the Code Enforcement Manager for the City of Rancho Cordova. I'm here representing the California Association of Code Enforcement Officers. I am the regional representative. I actually teach rental housing inspection programs to the organization. And as I reach out to our members, one of their concerns is that there is a disparity about the way this is enforced. Some jurisdictions, such as San Francisco, have it already in their nuisance ordinance. Others have to rely on water intrusion or dilapidated conditions. We think it would be much better across the board to have a very definite regiment that we could enforce mold under and make sure that everybody's enforcing it safely. Also, I'd like to dispel any myths that code enforcement officers are not trained to be able to determine the difference between tenant-caused mold and mold that is produced by some kind of substandard housing condition. We're very well-educated and keep ourselves up to date on that. So I would like to just dispel that, but we feel that this is a very great ordinance that should be supported to ensure that all jurisdictions and all residents are living in safe, healthy housing.
Okay, thank you. And I have to turn the gavel over to the Vice Chair. I'm being called to present bills and human services on psychotropic drugs on foster care.
I'll come behind you. It was special order, but they had a previous presentation.
Next witness.
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, my name is John Lovell, and I'm here on behalf of the California College and University Police Chiefs Association. We're charged with the responsibility of protecting about 3 million college students and the employees on the campuses that they attend. And one of the things we find a lot with our members is we get complaints from students about the quality of non-campus student housing. And one of the issues that eventually comes up is mold. And think back to when you were in college, if you ever lived off campus, it was, basically, Bombay standards. It was not really great housing. And so we get this kind of a problem. This is a really important bill. It'll help with healthy housing. We commend the author for bringing it forward.
Good afternoon, Steve Wallach, on behalf of the Alameda County Board of Supervisors, who adopted a support position this morning. So, urge your support.
All right, anybody else in favor? Just come up and say your name and your position and the organization you represent. All right. Anybody else in support? All right. Anybody in opposition? You guys can make room for the opposition. That'd be great. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Ron Kingston, representing 5 apartment associations, the Apartment Association California Southern Cities, Apartment Association Orange County, East Bay Rental Housing Association, NorCal, and North Valley, covering large spots and swaths of California. The bill, let's take a step back for a minute. The bill seeks to make the existence of mold, any kind of mold, in any amount of mold, a substandard housing condition. Yet, this is what the California Department of Health says about mold. And it's noted in your committee analysis as well. After considerable research, the question by CDPH, staff has determined that sound, science-based PELs, these are health-based standards, for indoor molds can't be established at this time. Additionally, standards for judging acceptable, tolerable, normal quantity of molds hasn't been established. That's what CDC says about establishing mold standards. This bill, once again, seems to implicate only rental housing, not commercial, not hotels, not motels, not industrial properties, as declaring a war on mold, all kinds of mold, no matter who does it. And it charges health and health inspectors, as well as the courts, to determine what inappropriate housekeeping methods are. That's the only way we could get out of it in terms of being a landlord as an adequate defense. Is a court equipped to determine how I keep house? Is a health inspector determined to do that? Is a health inspector determined that the bread, other types of molds are hazardous or not? CDC and the Department of Health have held these standards, all these Department of Health, regardless of being federal or state, saying it is not measurable. They cannot determine this. In fact, a senator well over 13 years ago kind of found this out when there are certain standards that were built. Nothing could be determined to do this. And there are, in the sale or conveyance of single-family 1 to 4 properties, there is a disclosure document that memorializes this fact. And the Department of Health states most molds can be easily cleaned up. It has been alleged that there is no standard, that we need to identify mold. What type of mold? What type of concentration? Who pays for this? Who complains about it? It has been alleged that tenants complain about mold or health standards. It can be easily remedied, and so that has been memorialized by our own state Department of Health as to what that is. There are, kind of think about molds, and let me give you 3 concluding remarks. Think of molds of being somewhere, as science and medical professionals have said, somewhere between 10,000 and 300,000 different molds, and all of those communities say one thing: we rely on molds. we rely on most molds and they are not hazardous. It is part of existence. There's only one place that I can think of that is free of molds that wouldn't be challenged, and that is a scientifically created room that is dedicated for a purpose of that. Every house, every hotel, this hearing room has mold, and this bill creates a war on mold only in our rental properties, which we find to be particularly problematic. And last but not least, this, we believe, will lead clearly to abusive litigation practices because of every tenant will be charged with the ability of claiming that the existence of mold in their rental property is a substandard housing condition, and therefore that creates an automatic, an easy defense in every unlawful detainer action we know of. We urge the bill, as of now, to be held in committee until these issues are refined and clearly identified of where this bill wants to go. But right now, this bill is way too expansive, and we ask a no vote.
All right, next witness.
Deborah Carlton with the California Apartment Association. And while we oppose the bill, we would like to state for the record, we absolutely agree that mold should be eliminated in housing. In 2001, we participated with Senator Ortiz to pass the Toxic Mold Protection Act. What we just have concerns about today is the way in which the bill targets the problem. The problem for us, of course, is that mold is everywhere. And we believe that the penalties that come with this through the substandard housing provisions are excessive. No hyperbole intended, but with this bill, most housing in California, including dorms in universities, will be declared substandard. Really what we're looking for is a way for a tenant to inform us that there's a problem. We cannot today, landlords cannot today, randomly inspect their own housing. What we end up with in many cases is this being the #1 defense to an eviction for non-payment of rent. And that is usually the first time that the landlord will ever hear that there is a problem in the house. So what we simply are looking for today is some focus on how do we make sure that the landlord has knowledge that there's a problem in the unit and that they are given the opportunity to correct before it's used as a defense to eviction. And with those statements, we oppose the bill today.
Thank you. Anyone else in opposition?
Jennifer Tannehill with Aaron Reed and Associates on behalf of the San Diego County Apartment Association. I want to echo the concerns of our colleagues, and we have to oppose the bill. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, members, Tim Coyle on behalf of the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles and the Santa Barbara Rental Properties Association opposed to the bill.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll bring back to the committee for questions, comments. Yes, Senator Wieckowski.
Maybe I'm reading the bill wrong, but I see that it's just addressing housing. On page, what the hell was it? This is on the Legislative Council's Digest. This is the state housing law, which is administered by the Department of Housing and Community Development, prescribes standards for buildings used by human habitation and establishes definitions for that purpose. So if code enforcement were bringing an action against a motel for having mold, if this became law, would they have the ability under presumably the regulations are promulgated to determine whether it was mold caused by other conditions other than bad housekeeping or ventilation, substandard ventilation?
Turn your mic on. Yeah, there you go.
I'm in a different spot than I was. Yeah, we have quite extensive training. We do absolutely talk to the tenants. We do talk to them about when it is tenant caused. Under the Health and Safety Code, we issue a notice to the property owner, which gives them time to go ahead and deal with the concern before there's any penalties issued. We do deal with hotels and motels in the city of Rancho Cordova. We inspect hotels and motels just like we do any other rental unit. So yes, we do.
Mr. Wojciechowski, if I may, on point, on message. This bill only applies to housing, specifically housing, not hotels, not motels, not this hearing room, as we say. And so the authority to cite would be entirely different. This is a broad, this bill gives broad authority to all health inspectors and confusing direction to every court there is in California.
Just from now on, let's go to the chair.
No.
This
Sorry.
isn't a free-for-all.
Sorry.
Thank you.
That's it for now.
Okay, any other questions? Senator Roth?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. You know, maybe I'm not an expert on this, but I certainly see a difference between mold around the bathtub and mold that is in a wall or a ceiling because of a pipe leak. And I am mindful of the difficulty that landlords in apartments and other housing owners face. But you would certainly, if you knew there was mold on the ceiling or mold in the wall, you would probably be concerned about that before you rented the house to the next occupant, wouldn't you? Now, that's sort of a rhetorical question to which no response is required.
And none apparently offered.
None offered. But I was informed by the testimony of the code enforcement officers that they can certainly tell the difference between mold around the bathtub and mold that is a significant problem. Now, I am concerned about the fairness of the process with respect to the landlords, the owners of this property, and the notification issues that were raised. And to the extent the bill leaves this committee, I'd certainly ask the author to take a look at those. Again, I'm not an expert and haven't looked into it, but I do see that as an issue and some perhaps fundamental unfairness or at least some due process issues if in fact this substandard housing condition label is applied and landlords and owners have difficulty finding out. So,
thank you, Senator Roth. Any other questions, comments? Yes, Senator Bates.
I'm concerned, Senator Mitchell, with the broad definition of mold. Reason being, I live on the coast, and it is a continuing issue. You know, we have it in our house, and you know, have to kind of deal with it now and then, especially during the foggy times. So those who own apartments, commercial buildings in the coastal zones, you know, it appears, but it is, you know, to have that broad definition that it's visible, that's immediately assumes that perhaps million-dollar properties along the coast of California are substandard and can therefore be subject to this kind of penalty enforcement. So I would be more comfortable if we had a narrower definition of mold as it appears and what kind of mold. And we've heard terms that we have toxic mold and we have mold. We have mold in our air conditioners, in our cars, by the way, because I was told, you know, before you get in the car on a hot day, run your air conditioner before you get in there so it clears out the mold, because otherwise it can make you sneeze. And by the way, that happens to me on occasion. So I just think that it's going in a good direction in terms of making sure that landlords are really doing the job they need to do to ensure that their properties are in the best of condition for their residents. But it's overly broad, I think, in terms of visible mold, because we see that. So I would like to see you address that going forward.
I appreciate that concern, and clearly this is the first stop along a long process. We will continue to have the conversation. I think the comment about those who are trained and we charge to go inspect have the greater sensibility in terms of source of mold. But I am also compelled when they say that there's no definition, there's no continuity across the state, whether it's a coastal million-dollar property or whether it's a off-campus student housing apartment. I think trying to figure out a consistent definition that they can use as a tool to apply a consistent lens across the state is really our goal and what our charge is. And as I've said, we've worked diligently with committee staff to try to come up with a definition, but we'll continue that process. I am clear it's not perfect today. I am clear that please know that you have my commitment to continue to engage. Will we get to a place where everyone's happy with the final product? I can't make that promise. but I think that it's an important enough issue, given the levels of complaint, given the growing public health materials that draw the correlation that suggest that it is something we have a responsibility of paying attention to.
Just final comments. I think you're onto something, but I'm also concerned about the very broad definition, and I'm concerned about some of the testimony that the opposition brought up. And so I trust that you will further refine the definition so that it's something that's workable for owners of rental property. And so I'm going to lay off at this point, and hopefully you've narrowed the definition by the time it hits the floor, and I can vote in favor. So with that, what's the...
That will certainly be my goal.
Mendoza?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have concerns, many of which were already been addressed, and I do like the fact that you're saying that you're will continue to engage and continue to refine, and hopefully the product, as it continues to move forward, it will be something that will be likable to everybody. Some of the concerns that were brought here today from the Apartment Association seem to be real to me. One that resonated is the number one reason for non-payment for rent. I mean, if you're using this as an excuse to kind of, the renter themselves could have caused it to kind of stay there longer. I mean, we don't know the facts. I don't want the apartment owners to be stuck, or property owners to be stuck with a tenant who doesn't want to pay the rent and using this as an excuse. I think that the concern about being more expansive, it doesn't apply to businesses, which I'm not sure why. Maybe you could, as we're going through the process, maybe some of those concerns you could begin to address, because I don't want to be, I don't want this to be a punitive process, but more of a process where, as was stated by the Apartment Association, where they get knowledge and they have the opportunity to correct the problem. And that's what it should be about, not to be a punitive measure in any way. So I will be supporting it, but I'm kind of optimistic you'll be working with the opposition to get this in a place where they can be comfortable with.
I appreciate that, Senator Mendoza, and let me say that it would be, in my opinion, to have a clear definition of what constitutes mold would help in those situations where people claim that there's mold and therefore I'm not paying the rent. If there's a clear definition that everyone understands, and that could be then presented to the court, my immediate assumption wouldn't be that it would exacerbate the non-rent payment of rent, but could perhaps help in that instance. I think if in closing, Mr. Chair, unless there...
Perfect.
Thank you. This, for me, is reminiscent of a similar debate in this institution. I'm going to age myself, maybe 25 years ago, when I was an advocate with a legal services organization, where we talked about lead paint and the growing research at that point on the impact of lead paint in child development. And it was a similar kind of issue. Yes, there's costs associated, and it took many, many years and effort of many members to get to the point where there was a broad agreement that paint with lead in it could not be used in housing stock and then beyond. This is the beginning, I think, of this conversation with regard to mold. With regard to one point the opposition stated, with regard to your inability to inspect your property. As a landlord, which I am, and a tenant, which I am, and that I rent here in Sacramento while we're in session, I'm clear that as a landlord and my landlord can give me 24-hour notice to inspect the property. I'm clear that I get a letter every year from the Housing Authority in Los Angeles about their intent to inspect my rental stock to make sure that it's safe and appropriate. And if I have the wrong kind of lock on the door, I'm fined. So that is not true, that as a landlord, that you don't have a right to inspect your rental stock. You can with 24-hour notice. Again, I can't make any promises. I think this may be one of those kind of fundamental difference issues. I hope that we can come to an agreement and get closer to some language on defining what mold is and put that in statute to meet the needs of the people whose job it is to go out and inspect every day. And so it's not so broad, it's not so inconsistent across the state of California. And with that, I ask for your support today.
Thank you, Senator Mitchell. Move the bill. Have the Secretary call the roll.
The motion is due pass and refer to the Committee on Appropriations. Senators Bell, Cannella, Allen, Bates, Gaines, Galgiani, Leyva, I. McGuire, Mendoza, I. Roth, I. Wachowski, I.
Thank you, sir.
It has 4 votes. We'll place it on call for absent members.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you.